Hi there, Paul. Absolutely delighted, excited to have you join us today. And I guess part of my excitement is to do with the fact that, maybe the audience doesn't know this, right? Well, we're speaking to a company and somebody who is actually really in the trenches of Vision 2030. You're building practically everything in Saudi Arabia, right?
Not quite, but yeah, not far off.
You know what I mean? The main, the NEOM, the Marhaba, all of those projects that you're heavily involved with. So I'm very excited that we're going to get into the discussion, understand, learn about everything that you're doing, your experiences, so that the audience can really understand what's going on the ground. So to kick off with, I guess what would be really helpful is just to get a bit of an understanding on the work you're doing in Saudi at the moment in terms of the infrastructure projects that you've got and how these are contributing towards Vision 2030. And then as they progress, how do you see the business landscape changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Thanks, Asma, and hello everybody on the call. So so I'm Paul Doherty. I'm Country Director for Atkins Realis in Saudi Arabia, also responsible for Kuwait and Bahrain as well. Look, it's been a busy 4 years now. I've been in Saudi Arabia. I've been in region for about 8 or 9 years, and I've actually been with our business for 26 years this year. So I think, our business is one of construction consultancy. So, we're involved from end to end in terms of construction of projects, whether that be infrastructure projects or buildings and places. We undertake, planning, design and engineering in terms of land development, master planning and multidisciplinary design. We're also got a huge business of project managers and program managers, cost management and construction supervision. And we also undertake operations and maintenance as well. So we are very much end to end. And I guess now is the time to be in Saudi Arabia. I'm sure everybody on the call understands the cultural transformation that's being undertaken in Saudi over the last 5 to 10 years, but particularly in the last 3 or 4 years. The landscape has changed significantly, and as a result of that, the construction sector is booming. Some of the projects that you've mentioned there, NEOM the Line, King Salman Park, the list is endless. And I think for us, having an opportunity to be involved, at a really embryonic stage on those projects and to see them through to completion. A good example of that is Riyadh Metro. We've been working on Riyadh Metro now for 5 years. And that's about to launch and become in use as well. So a brilliant time to be in Saudi Arabia, huge amount of opportunity, very, very busy, but I wouldn't go any other way.
So Paul, just in terms of, just for the audience benefit, right? So obviously it's an emerging market. There's so much going on. There's so much PR behind Saudi in terms of push to develop the country and achieve this Vision 2030. What would you say are the key differences from, the past to where you are? So in the last 4 years, what has changed more dramatically in your perspective?
It was just about everything really in the last 4 or 5 years. So, Saudi's gone through a tremendous cultural revolution. For people internationally who are joining the call, you'll have seen headlines like "Women can now drive." That's just a tiny element of the transformation that Saudi's going through. I first came to Riyadh about 5 or 6 years ago, and it is a completely different place even now, only in a period of 5 or 6 years. It's a properly multicultural destination. Fantastic off the scale restaurants, destinations now to go to, brilliant coffee shops literally on every corner, a really exciting nightlife, education, hospitals, healthcare. It's all improved dramatically over the last 4 or 5 years, and that's just a microcosm in Riyadh. You can say the same for every city I go to, whether it be Jeddah, Khobar, Alula, Red Sea, wherever it might be. It's an incredible place.
Okay, great. And so I guess as a business, you're a large business based in Saudi, or obviously all over the world as well. And Saudi has long been known not to have legal landscape or sort of rules and principles that they kind of abide by in the past. And I would say, well, no, let me rephrase that. Like like you have law and policy in other countries. I mean, Saudi Arabia has never really had anything structured in place. How would you say, what are the changes in the regulatory landscape, right? So we've seen lots of things change over the past couple of years with new incentives, new rules coming out, new options for people to set up. So what would you say are the common changes you as a business have seen in the last, say, 12 to 18 months?
Well, I think, look, the business of setting up a business and operating a business in Saudi is complex. It's simpler than it was, and it's certainly more structured than it's ever been.
Yeah.
But it is complicated. There are rules that probably don't apply to other countries in terms of sort of regulatory requirements and things like nationalisation, and we'll probably pick up on that later. That said, if I go back sort of 5 or 6 years, it was very, very difficult. It is simpler now, but it is still complicated. But there are a set of rules, and there is quite a high level of bureaucracy. And if you follow process and you follow the rules, then you can operate quite easily within Kingdom. As we do, we have 3 or 4 different trading entities, and there's a complexity behind that as well. But you can operate these days now as a 100% foreign-owned company. The days of requiring a local shareholder are gone. And some of these processes that have been brought in over the last sort of 2 or 3 years have made it easier to operate in Kingdom, but it still does have an element of complexity, I guess, as it does anywhere in the world.
Yeah. No, fair enough. And I think that they're welcome changes that have been coming forward with the processes and the structure. So those are good. But then, so as a business, you've been established in Saudi for decades, right? So as Atkins, you've been there, you've been working on projects historically over a period of time. But then I realized, I mean, obviously, with the support you've now got the regional headquarters program. So that's been the one that's making the biggest noise over the last 12 months. So what made you proceed with getting the RHQ, given that you already have entities in Saudi and you're registered, you're trading, because this is a common question that I get from a lot of people. They ask and they say, what are the options for setting up, and why do we need an RHQ? So it'd be good to just hear it from somebody who knows everything in terms of setup and structure.
Yeah, so I think there was 2 drivers for us around the RHQ. First was legislative. So a lot of the customers that we work for, so probably 95% of our work is public sector. And, there are legislative requirements now for businesses like ours. It's mandated from the 1st of January this year to have a regional headquarters based in Saudi Arabia if you're operating across the Middle East. So first of all was a legislative requirement, but for us it was a natural evolution because, the way our business has grown in Saudi Arabia over the last 3 years, we've gone from a headcount of around 100 people to 2,300 people now as of today. It's just been a natural transition for us. 70% of our regional revenue is in Saudi Arabia. So, it became an absolute no-brainer for us. Why would you not have your regional headquarters where 70% of your workload's coming from, right? So, and the RHQ legislation gives you certain benefits as well, from things like Saudiization, etc. So, for us, it was a natural transition. It was a legislative requirement, and you put those 2 things together, and it's an absolute no-brainer.
Yep, no, absolutely. So I guess the onerous requirements for the RHQ, where you've got to have 15 people, but I guess if you're a large team anyway, you fulfill that criteria. So it doesn't really make much difference. But has it made any difference in terms of, so we've got Saudiization, as you know, I mean, you're obviously at the forefront of that, managing local nationals versus expats. And I think the line of work that you do, it's quite heavy on the volume of bringing in expats from all over the world to the country. So how have you seen that evolve? Has the RHQ made any difference, or is that still managed by the other entities? I mean, how are you balancing the workforce integration into Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, so look, I mean, our RHQ is our principal entity in Saudi Arabia. We have a number of other trading entities, and there's a complexity around that in relation to the activities that each one of those businesses do. But we're one business where Atkins Realis is umbrellaed under a regional headquarters. So I think in relation to balancing Saudiization. I mean, look, Saudiization is a nationalisation is a complex subject. We could probably spend an hour quite easily on that, but I think it is important to understand the requirements of that. And, the Saudiization percentages change depending upon the activities that you're undertaking. We employ over 600 Saudi nationals now in our business. In some respects, Saudiization, nationalisation in Saudi is in some ways easier than other areas. I mean, without naming names, there's other parts of the region that have brought in a nationalisation agenda, and the actual population located in those countries is far less than there is in Saudi Arabia. So, from the perspective of us employing Saudi nationals, first of all, there are millions more than in other geographies across the region, and the level of education and the level of willingness to learn and to work is fantastically high in Saudi. So we don't have a challenge at all in identifying talent and employing that talent in our business. It's a set of rules that we need to abide by. The rules are very, very clearly set out, and we adopt our operations accordingly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so another factor that I think, this is a question that we get quite often, is, but as part of the RHQ, the senior management team are given premium residency in the country, right? And historically, as we know, senior management have kind of, I guess, resided in the UAE or other surrounding areas, right, for comfort, against schooling, infrastructure, family support, etc. How has that changed? I mean, because the requirement is that the management has to move to Saudi Arabia. So how's that impact? So
look, I mean, it's changed because the infrastructure of Saudi and the main cities has changed. As I touched on earlier, healthcare in Saudi Arabia is second to none. Schooling has improved massively over the last 2 or 3 years and continues to improve. So, living in Saudi Arabia in Riyadh or Jeddah or Khobar is as far from a hardship as you could honestly imagine. Everybody will have seen, the sporting scene in Saudi now has gone through the roof, whether that be golf, whether that be football, expos coming here, World Cup, Asian Games. I lived in Dubai for 4 years. And, honestly, hand on heart, I prefer living in Riyadh now. Myself and my wife, we have a great standard of living here, and it's a brilliant place to live and work. It genuinely is. And, my management team here have taken the decision to move to Saudi Arabia. I honestly haven't had to drag them over kicking and screaming. A lot of people have seen it as a natural evolution of their career. And, anybody worth their weight in salt is going to want to be at the heart of where the action is, right? And the action is in Saudi Arabia. So, it's we thought maybe 5 or 6 years ago that might have been a stumbling block, but it absolutely isn't. No, that's good to know. So I think these are all positive changes, and I think it's just important for people to understand, really, from those who are actually living, working and operating in the country, to hear it, because others, you hear about it all the time, but it's important coming from you directly. So I guess my next question is going to be around the projects that you're working on. So I think I did actually have the privilege to visit NEOM when you were digging the line. So I saw it when it's raw state. So I guess, do you think that's going to be completed by 2030? And what is the sort of, the plan around that? Because we did hear some reporting on it that it's been sort of scaled back, but is that still the case? Yeah, I mean, look, without going into all of the detail on the project, it's not so much scaled back, but there's only so much you can build at once, right? So, there is absolutely a focus on the line. There is a project that's now established and is in robust design and construction as well. And absolutely, that project will be completed for 2030. The line, I think the overall grand vision is 170 kilometers, and will all 170 kilometres be ready for 2030? Well, no, of course it won't. But the line is a completely different way of building, living, and working. So yeah, okay, people focus on the line, the project, but actually it's a significant cultural shift in the way people will live. And that needs to evolve as well, as that project continues to evolve. But no, we have a large team up at Neon the Line. We're working on Oxygen as well, which is another Neon project, and one or two others. Trojena, which is for the Winter Games, that a lot of people focus on. Snow in the desert. It's they're brilliant projects to be involved with, and as a company and me personally, we're hugely proud to be involved with those. We genuinely are.
And do you think if Saudi win, I think have they won the World Cup? I should have done my.
They have. Well, yes, they have. I think they're the only. So it's looking right.
So I'm assuming that Atkins will be building the stadium as well, alongside everything else in the kingdom.
We're engaged with the Ministry of Sport at the moment. I can't give too much away, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, who wouldn't want to be involved in an Asian Games or a World Cup stadium? If you're in the business of design and engineering and construction, then yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So what I find interesting is, obviously, so you're involved in all these projects, but it's not just about the infrastructure and the engineering and the building. There are so many opportunities around it, the building the smart cities, the technology that is formed with it, all of the other infrastructure projects that are part of this. So I guess what people will probably want to understand is, how can you win these projects? Because if the opportunities are in the kingdom right now, there is a lot of encouragement across the board around the world for companies to come in, set up, and bid for projects. So just generally, you've obviously been at first-hand experience of bidding for projects. How challenging are they? How difficult are they? And I mean, we know the opportunities are there, so it'd be just good for people to get an insight. And it's always good to know the good, but also the bad with it as well, so people can be well prepared.
I think look for us, Asma, as any business anywhere needs a strategy in terms of how it plans, a strategy and a business plan, how it plans to develop over a certain period of time. And one of the dangers with Saudi is the wealth of opportunity. And I know of other companies that have stretched themselves too thinly and bid everything and won nothing. For us, it's a case of everything we do is grounded in a client relationship. So, we spend a lot of time talking to our clients, engaging with our clients, understanding their business, and then shaping ourselves accordingly. Honestly, we could bid thousands of projects every week, and we don't. We're very selective on who we work for and what projects we work on. And I think anybody coming into Saudi Arabia, regardless of what sector they're operating on, I would operating in rather, I would, focus down on a strategy and a business plan, and then try not to get diverted away from that, because there is a lot of diversion, there is a lot of opportunity, there are a lot of bright flames that you can aim for, which sometimes have the opportunity to do more harm than good. So I think have a business plan, have a strategy, develop client relationships, deliver work really well, or products, or whatever sector it is you're working on, and then, strategically focus to win on opportunity projects.
Excellent. That's really good advice, actually. And I think, it's quite easy to get caught up in the excitement and of the opportunity that exists, and saying that we want to work on lots of projects. And I think everyone is trying to get involved at this early stage and to be part of the Vision 2030. And there are lots of projects out there. So I think that's a very good response in terms of being thoughtful about and selective about what you want to do. So then just moving on from that, I'd be interested to understand. So I think a lot of people know about Neon, but what about some of the other projects, like the Cube, for example, the Marhaba that you're building? I mean, what's the purpose of that? Just a little bit of background, and what is the vision for that?
So we can talk about that project because it's been launched, and if people go onto YouTube and Google Macab, which is the Cube, and the surrounding development. So That's a project that we've been involved with now for about 2.5 years. We secured that project through a design competition and have been working on the concept design. The macabre, the cube, and then the Maraba development around it, and the company's called New Maraba Development Company, is effectively the transformation of a part of Riyadh. It creates an icon, which is the macabre, and then creates a huge master plan development, mixed use master plan development around it. So, that's going to transform that area of Riyadh, and create an iconic development. The cube is 400 meters cube, which is quite difficult to actually imagine. It's enormous, and that would be akin to any landmark in any city, whether that be a Burj Khalifa or a Burj Al Arab or an Eiffel Tower or a Shard. It's an equivalent structure in terms of a lot bigger actually, but in terms of landmark, and it creates a landmark focus in Riyadh with a master plan development around it, based upon smart city development and technology to create again a new way of living in Riyadh and globally actually, and harnesses some of some fantastic technology, some of which is only now currently in development, to provide what will be a pretty special experience. Certainly go onto YouTube and Google Macabre, MUQAAB, and you'll see the launch video of that. It's out of this world. And again, we're amazingly proud to be involved with that project.
And so, Paul, do you work with other kind of emerging tech companies as part of these projects, or are you? I mean, I know you're focused on the engineering and the consulting around that, and the design work, etc. But as part of this vision, I'm sure there are things that are being developed alongside that, right? So planned alongside that. So are you working with other companies around this as to deliver the project?
We are, absolutely. So, some of those companies are appointed directly by the clients. Some of them are appointed by us to create a sort of multidisciplinary approach. But yeah, in terms of sort of, audio, visual, and, some of the more enhanced technology around some of the particular developments that we're involved with, at the end of the day, if we don't have the capability internally, then yeah, absolutely, we partner with other companies to join forces with trusted partners. We have a supply chain that we've worked with for many years, and quite often we're pointed in a certain direction by our clients as well to say, we've been working with this company, can you bring those on board? And I mean, it's a good example actually of the sort of flexibility and agility I guess you need to operate in Saudi Arabia. Some of these companies that we work with and partners are local, some of them are international, but having an agility to be able to contract with those companies and join forces to bring to bear, a true multidisciplinary service or offering to a client is really attractive to certain clients. Anything that makes a client's life easier, then absolutely they're willing to embrace. So, the new companies coming into Saudi and into, say, Riyadh, then spending time on the ground, understanding your competitors, but also other companies that you can partner with, whether that be a formalized partnership or a joint venture or a sort of subcontract arrangement is absolutely worth investing time and effort in doing that.
This is quite interesting. So I go to Saudi quite regularly. And the other day, one of my colleagues actually compared Saudi Arabia to a startup. And I guess the reason being is everything's happening at once. So it's almost like it's chaos, right? So you're building all these big things, projects everywhere. Then I think it was a couple of months ago, I was there and I saw the developments near the airport. I don't know if you've seen those housing developments, right? Accommodation. And everything is kind of at its infancy and encouraging people to come in. Foreigners will go in and live there. A little bit like what probably Dubai did 20 years ago. But it's at the, so right now, what is important for people to understand is there is so much emerging at a fast, because every month that I go, there's something new to see,
Yeah.
right? All the restaurants that are coming in, it's almost like, you know, in Jeddah, it looks like Miami, most places that you go to, right? So it's kind of emanating a lot of what the US is about. So for the audience who are concerned about structures and setups, would you say it's right to say, don't think, just do it, just invest? Because if you are serious about being part of something this big and this exciting, it's good to get in early rather than to wait, because by the time you thought about it, it's always too late.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think, you know, getting early, I mean, you know, the landscape in Saudi for the last 5 years has you know, it's been busy here for a long time, and it certainly doesn't feel to me like it's a startup and is at the start of that program. You know, we're already now beginning to see some of the vision projects coming to completion. So some of the hotels opening in the Red Sea, for instance, and you know, the infrastructure now completed for King Salman Park here in Riyadh. You know, there are a whole host of projects that you know, may not have actually been publicised as much as they should have done, maybe in terms of completion. But I think for me there is lots and lots of opportunity in Saudi. People firmly fixed on 2030 because it's a 2030 vision, but look, the development and the transformation of Saudi will go on for many decades.
Yeah.
You know, one thing there is absolutely no doubt of is you know, the Saudi leadership's commitment to transforming their country, and you know, that's already you know, been witnessed in what's happened to date, and that will continue for many years to come. So I think my advice to people thinking about coming over to Saudi is, yeah, absolutely, for me, a no-brainer. But I think, you know, for me, it goes back to being, you know, strategic in terms of how you approach the market. I keep coming back to that point, you know, have a plan, have a strategy, have a business plan, and be focused.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if anybody's thinking about making the step over to Saudi Arabia, then I would absolutely urge them to do so. Yeah.
Oh, great. So, Paul, I have another burning question myself, actually. I just kind of thinking about it. So I was probably back in June, I saw that Saudi was actually introducing their first air helicopters, right? Air taxis. I think it was part of the Hajj program that they were going to take pilgrims across the country. How likely, because I've seen this in Singapore as well, I don't know if it's fully operational, but how likely is this program to take off? I mean, with air taxis, particularly from one place to another?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, it will. I mean, our team have done some work actually with some of the transport authorities in Saudi Arabia and actually in the UAE as well. You know, and you know, the technology is there. It works. There's a huge amount of sort of regulatory controls that are required, you know, in terms of, you know, how you can control the sky, etc., etc. But I absolutely no doubt that will be introduced into the region and into Saudi Arabia as well. It is real. I mean, you know, people scratch their heads thinking, you know, is that ever going to happen? Yeah, I can guarantee you it will happen, and it is happening.
Yeah. And I've also, obviously, I think, you know, I work a lot with NISA, and it's really nice to see. We sometimes get heads up on projects that are coming up, especially the electric vehicles, also driverless vehicles, because they're very ambitious. And I think a country like Saudi Arabia is quite welcome, whereas a lot of cautious regulation takes place and process happens in a lot of other countries. But with Saudi Arabia, everything is fast and quick, and it's quite efficient, and it's, you know, ready before you can even think, or you turn around and there it is in front of you.
I mean, look, you know, where there's a will, there's a way, and you know, I think in terms of, you know, the Saudi government and leadership, I mean, they're absolutely focused on introducing new technology and doing things differently. You know, you talked about Neon the Line earlier, and you know, that's not just a big building; that's creating a new way to live and work. And you know, the leadership in Saudi Arabia is fantastically dedicated on changing the culture of how people live and work. Absolutely.
Great. So my final question before we go to the audience for their questions is going to be around people, right? So when people are thinking about setting up in a country, they want to invest, it's an exciting opportunity. How do they then encourage their teams to, because it's a big cultural change, people from the West, particularly. I mean, you've obviously been in the region a long time, so obviously for you, I think it's probably different, and you've been involved with these projects for a long time too. But let's say you can look at some innovative businesses, smart businesses, trying to come into the country, see the opportunities, but then they want to encourage young families or teams to come in. How can they adapt to the cultural changes, and how can they encourage their teams to I guess, to transfer to the location?
I think that, I mean, look, let's be honest, sometimes in the past, Saudi's had some bad press, right? And I look at our business. We're a global business of 40,000 people, and what I've seen in our business alone is a change in the leadership in our business in terms of the vision for Saudi Arabia and the commitment to Saudi Arabia as well. And we've got our board out here for the first time in December. The attractiveness of the projects and the stories that I hear from our team over here has attracted them across. And I think anybody thinking about living in Saudi Arabia and coming over to Saudi Arabia, then I think the culture shift is not as much as people think it will be. I think in the past it may have been. Certainly now it's a lot less. We've got a huge amount of staff over here who have got young families and extended families as well. And I think I saw a statistic the other day that we've got 70 different nationalities in our business in Saudi Arabia, and that creates a culture of diversity in itself. So it's fantastic. In fact, at lunchtime today we had Sri Lankan meal, which was just brilliant, right? So I think people who want to come into Saudi, they have to be open to new things and open to new cultures and diversity. And I think anybody who's got those traits and is interested in doing something different and working somewhere different and embracing local cultures and different cultures, then Saudi will be a brilliant place for them.
No, great. I mean, I totally agree with you. I love the place. I have considered moving. Well, I mean, we've got a presence there already, but I've considered moving there myself. So, I mean, every time I go, it's changed dramatically from what it used to be. And the landscape is very different. So I do enjoy it. Okay, so I really appreciate your time there, Paul. It's been amazing just listening. I mean, I've seen the project, so I know how it is, and it's just nice to get that across.
Pretty incredible, right?
Well, so just before I end and go to questions, I wanted to kind of just say to the audience, we are actually arranging a mission to Saudi Arabia for companies and emerging technologies who are looking to invest in the country, and we're actually hosting it with the Ministry of Investment. So we will send out details later. It is an invite-only event, so if people are interested, they've got to be serious about it. So we'll be selective as to who can come to this mission. It's because it's in partnership with MISA. Obviously, we want to be sure that we bring the serious companies to the kingdom. So that's something. More details will follow. Anyone who's interested in that can reach out to us as well. But yeah, I'll pass over to Danny, who may want to go to the audience questions, as I can't see them.
Thank you, Asma and Paul. That was a super insightful discussion. As you say, now we've come to the Q&A part of our webinar, where we'll be taking some time to answer your questions. In the lead up to today, we actually asked you to submit your own questions, and we've received some great ones along with those that have been sent through throughout this webinar. So we'll start off with the ones that were sent through previously. To submit additional questions, again, feel free to use the comment box located on your screen, and we'll try to address as many as we can within the time that we have. So we'll start off with Paul. How difficult is it to bid for government contracts? What does the process look like? Do companies need an RHQ, and are there any exemptions? Long-winded question.
Straight to the deep end.
Well, right. Okay. So do companies need an RHQ? It depends, to be honest. It's a complex subject. We do, because we're a consultancy business, construction consultancy business that bids for public sector construction projects. So absolutely, we're mandated to have an RHQ, and as I say, we have. How easy is it to bid and win work? I don't think that's easy anywhere. If I'm honest, there's certainly more opportunities go out here. So even if you work on a percentage basis alone, right, you're going to win more because there's more projects to go at. But as I say, the important thing for us is to not go crazy, don't scattergun the bidding process, be focused, develop relationships, and work typically is given on a price and quality basis. That varies. The evaluation criteria is very open and honest. Actually, similar to back in the day, many years ago, when I was in the UK working in the public sector, predetermined and shared quality criteria. Things coming in now like local content, which is a more holistic measure of in-kingdom value. Criteria like that we're beginning to see used as well. So, the process of bidding and winning work is the same here as anywhere, perhaps more transparent here. The procurement rules and regulations are well set, established, and well understood. So, the process is probably similar to other areas in the Middle East and the wider world as well.
And I could just add to that, Danny. I think from a RHQ perspective, I think RHQ is really like, as Paul has said, it's some companies are mandated to have it because they are public sector type of bids. But there are companies who are probably in climate change, sustainability, green energy, etc., where there is a need and a demand in Saudi Arabia generally. So it doesn't necessarily mean that if they're not already in the kingdom, they don't necessarily have to have an RHQ. It is mainly to have a commercial registration in the country, and then the tender list is open anyway, right? So it's about having sufficient relationships and a business case to answer to be able to justify why that project is of benefit to the country. And then generally across the board, I think it's always open to discussion. And I think mostly those types of companies will win it. So another example is AI technology, right? It's advancing at such a fast pace. If there are companies that are really innovating in that space or can really make a difference, then and there aren't any other bidders, then why wouldn't they just be looked at as a priority? So yeah, I think it really depends. I don't think it's mandatory. There are some companies for which it is mandatory, like those who are already in the kingdom and have been for a long time and are looking at the bigger projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. So another one for you, Paul. How do you manage your Saudization, and is it a complex process?
It is a complex process, yes. How do we manage it? We employ Saudi nationals. It's as simple as that, really. We've got, as I say, we've got nearly 600 Saudis in the business now, and we've got an active graduate program. We've got over 100 graduates in the business at the moment. We've got some fantastic people coming into our business right at the beginning of their careers. Young learners coming into industry for the first time. We've got a really well structured and established graduate program focused on Saudi Arabia and Saudi nationals. But we're employing Saudis at all different levels of the business. For me, Saudization is, for us as a business, genuinely more about creating a sustainable business in Saudi Arabia rather than hitting the numbers and ticking the boxes or complying with legislation. My vision for our business in Saudi Arabia is to hand it over to Saudi nationals to run as a business in their own country. We've worked hard over the last 2 or 3 years to get to a position whereby we move towards that. So it's a complex subject. The rules change fairly regularly, which keeps you on your toes from a business perspective.
That's where we come in, right? Keep you ahead of the game.
An excellent government relations officer that I employ, and we use external companies like yourself as well to support that. And we've got a sort of a number of legal partners as well that we use in specific instances. But you need to be focused on nationalisation or Saudization for Saudi constantly, and we are. And we achieve that. Each one of our entities currently is in platinum status from an ITCAP perspective, which is, what we strive to achieve. Brilliant.
Another one for you, Paul. And I'll keep all of your questions together, and I'll do some asthma questions after. It's an interrogation here.
Keep you here for another hour.
Exactly. How easy is it to navigate the various Saudi governmental portals such as MISA, Gazette, and Mukim?
Well, it's easy for me because I don't have to do it. I have a team that do it. But no, look, I mean, it's, one of the things that strikes me here is that how well advanced those portals are. So, if you look at it from an individual visa perspective, absolutely everything is on my phone. Whether that's my passport, my visa, my entry-exit visa, anything in relation to specifics around employment is all available via the Absher app. That includes healthcare as well. So, that sort of architecture in terms of government portals and, personal information is so easily accessible. Certainly easier than it is in, look, I'm from the UK, right? I love the UK.
Yeah.
Easier than it is in the UK.
Yeah.
So that has massive benefits in terms of just making it easy to live here and easy to get hold of information that you need when you need it. The portals can be complex, but again, the governments are, particularly over the last sort of 12, 18 months, are consolidating a lot of these portals into, 3 or 4 specific areas or portals that everything will be focused into. Nafaf and Etimad are 2 examples of that. And, we've seen more and more channeled into those portals now, whether that be, contract issues or payment from clients, etc. So I actually think it's a good structure. It's a bit overwhelming when you first look at it, but once you get your head around it, it actually makes life easier.
Yeah, absolutely. A slightly easier question for you. What would be your top tip for companies looking to expand to Saudi?
Oh, that's a good question, Mark. I think, look, I'm repeating myself here now, unashamedly. To me, it is about having a strategy and a business plan. I think any business, regardless of where you're set up around the world, has to have a strategy and a business plan. And then, be agile enough to move around that and shift it as you need to, but, be robust enough not to be diverted away from it by the plethora of opportunities that there are in the market. So I think that's, plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant advice. Another one for you. So can you touch base on development of advanced air mobility in Saudi Arabia, including infrastructure and aerial vehicles, namely EVTOLs?
Not particularly my specific area of expertise, if I'm perfectly honest. And there's a guy in our business called Roger Cruikshank who is an absolute expert in that area. So he would be able to talk about that in far more detail than I can. Look, it is an area. It is an area that's focused on, but then I'll give you an example, right? So King Salman International Airport, there's a huge development plan around that. That's the extension of the existing airport, basically, tripling the size of the existing airport, slap bang in the middle of Riyadh. So, transportation is a fantastic sector to be involved in Saudi Arabia, whether that be in the cities or, in the more remote areas as well. So I can't talk about that subject in any detail.
That's fine. We'll speak to your colleague. Don't worry about that. We'll get that answer back somehow.
Absolutely. Another one for you. So from a cultural perspective, how do you prepare team members coming over from the UK, EU and US?
I think I asked this question myself already, but it's fine if someone else has asked.
Yeah, I think, look, we have a sort of cultural training program. That's some of which is tailored for Saudi Arabia, but most of which is tailored for the Middle East, really. So, we equip our staff coming over with the knowledge that they need to be able to, culturally prepare to work in, a Muslim nation. Yeah. So, there's just, there's a wealth of information online around that. We've tailored specific training, and every single member of our team who come in from, whether they be a new starter or through talent mobility, they're given cultural awareness training.
Yeah, Absolutely. And final one for you before we move on to Asma. In your experience, to what extent are clients in Saudi concerned about sustainability and sustainable practices?
Yeah, a lot. And again, a significant shift over the last 12 or 18 months on that. I think some of the projects, you think of some of the projects that we're involved with at the moment. I mean, King Salman Park, for instance. So King Salman Park, for those that don't know, is, will be the world's largest urban park, based in the middle of Riyadh, 10 times the size of Central Park, over 3 million trees being planted. That will be, Riyadh's green lung. It will change. It will create a microclimate in Riyadh, just through the sort of output of the oxygen from the plants and the trees. So, at macro level, you have that type of development which is firmly focused on sustainability and environment and environmental concerns. But then on every single project that we're seeing now, whether that be a mega project or a giga project program, we are seeing a huge focus on sustainability, huge focus on it, particularly over the last sort of 12 or 18 months. We've got an environmental team here, we've got a sustainability team, and some of the stuff they're doing, is world leading when I compare and contrast around what's going on elsewhere within our business. And of course, that's great at attracting talent over here as well, because, people involved in that sector want to be at the forefront of the developments of it. And that's happening here in Saudi. Yeah, it's huge.
Brilliant. Great to know. Sorry, Asma?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's a really, really exciting to learn more about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So just a few more questions for Asma. I'm conscious of time here. So we'll start with, you've worked with lots of large companies in Saudi. In your opinion, what are the biggest challenges and how are such companies staying compliant?
In Saudi, so those who are, I think the hardest part is the Saudization established companies, and as they've grown organically, I think have systems in place and structures in place, and it's about resources. So I think if you're going into the market, maybe at an early stage, it's about pre-planning. And I think I confer with whatever Paul said, is the planning stage of being aware of what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. Because if you're not going to balance what's expected of you in the country, then it doesn't make sense, right? So before you enter the country, I think there's got to be a lot of due diligence in terms of understanding what to expect when you arrive in the land. So when you register your company, when you invest into the business, then I think it's important to understand, well, what does the government expect from me, and how am I going to comply with that, and can I actually manage all of those things? So if Saudization is something that could be a challenge, then you need to plan around that and say, well, I was planning on taking people that already understand my business into the kingdom, but maybe I need to do a little bit more engagement to find out if there's talent out there that can support me with that. But I think in the early stages, the first 12 months particularly, there are exemptions around Saudization anyway. So people can pretty much set up, get the operations up and running, and then thereafter, I think you can start to think about Saudization.
Perfect. Another question. So how experienced is Centura Global with setting up companies in Saudi? Can you give a recent example? Gosh,
we've done too many to mention now. How can I? So we actually, I'm going to give an interesting one, because we're not going to give the traditional one. I mean, we do all of the large companies, we do all of the mid-sized companies. A really good one that we did recently is on the project, the Red Sea project. So it's a charter yacht company that sort of does big celebs and big high-profile people. They wanted to set up in Saudi Arabia, didn't traditionally fall under the RHQ requirements. So they didn't meet the criteria in terms of what the government normally looks for. So we actually worked with the government to try and explain what this is all about and the value to the country. And they were very passionate about bringing their business into Saudi Arabia. So that one went really well. I think the challenges around it were that they didn't meet the criteria, but we still were successful with it.
Brilliant. Another question for you. So I've read that there are a number of different license types to choose from in Saudi. What is the most common?
I think it's the commercial registration. One of the key things that people need to think about is what they say as their code, how they classify their company as to what they're doing. And most companies, I think, do consultancy or professional services. But you have to be very careful, because you can't go outside of that. And hence the reason why a lot of companies end up setting up more than one entity, because if it's that classification, and then when you are looking for quotas for people to come in, that's really when you get bitten and you don't understand. So it's about being very, very clear on understanding what the law says and what the policies and rules are, so that when you are entering that market, you don't just look at the registration, but you look at the employment of people that you need, the talent that you need to hire, how you need to operate, who do you need to liaise with if it comes to government, and having all those ducks in a row before doing anything.
Absolutely. And they also have different requirements, right? So services often permit 100% foreign ownership. Professional can be 25%. Trading has very high capital requirements, so you don't see many trading companies. So yeah, lots of things to consider when it comes to that. What are the most common pitfalls that companies encounter when expanding into Saudi, and how can they be avoided?
Pitfalls. I think it's not being prepared again. Right, so a lot of people I've seen, and I get a lot of advice from companies coming with the excitement that they want to go in, they want to set up a company, or they, already are maybe established in the UAE or the Middle East already, and they want to set up the branch office. I think it's really not being fully clear on the differentiators, right? Because it's taken 20 years now for everyone to have ease of business in Dubai. We can see across the globe, people just go in, you can set up, the systems are quite straightforward. But again, there are still some complexities around auditing, around making sure that you are compliant. Quotas are still in place in UAE as well. So with a 20-year advanced process, I think when you're going into Saudi, it's just to be prepared and to say to yourself, well, actually, if I'm going to set up, this is a long-term project for me, this is a long-term goal for me, then I need to understand, how this is going to impact me and my team and my investment. So again, we get lots of questions, people coming in and saying, I want premium residency. So what is the best structure for us? But again, people haven't really understood why they want premium residency. It's just that, I want to get through the airport faster, or maybe because it allows me to reside. So I think it's just thinking through all the nuances, and it's not just being sort of tunnel vision about one thing. You've got to, and this is why the difference is having a commercial awareness around why you're doing what you're doing, and not just doing it because you have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Penultimate question. So is it possible to set up and start visiting KSA to test the waters as a foreign entity?
Yeah, so you can, you can go in and test the waters anyway. You can work with local clients, local partners, understand how that business is. The only difficulty you will have is you don't get taken seriously in Saudi Arabia unless you have a commercial entity, right? So if you want to bid for projects or work and you're a foreign entity and you're just visiting and you're trying to build relations, or you want to win contracts, generally you can probably do that across the world. I mean, the US is another country where if you're not locally present, you can't really do business properly in the US, and Saudi Arabia is very similar. So if you don't have a presence in the country, then it's just really fact-finding missions that you would do. But if you're serious about operating, trading, investing, then you have to set up an entity.
Brilliant. And the final question, I'm conscious of time here, so we've only got a few more minutes left. So could you please share some light on the tourism sector, setting up a new business entity for travel?
I'm going to ask Paul to answer that one, if you're aware of it. I mean, I know, I'm aware of some, but tourism is obviously ripe. There's a lot going on in that sector. The government is really pushing out a lot of initiatives. I mean, as you can see, all the biggest concerts and events are happening in Saudi Arabia. There's so much that's changed, and tourism, the visas have gone online as a start. I mean, it was a real minefield to get a visa to go to Saudi Arabia before, and the process was so archaic and long, but now everything's online. You can just go online, instantly get a visa, and there you are.
Brilliant. I think, we don't really have much more time, so I'll just close the questions here. So that's all basically we have time for today. If your question was not answered during the session, rest assured that we will follow up with you individually after the event to provide a response. Thank you all for joining us today for this super insightful discussion on Saudi Arabia's remarkable transformation and the vast opportunities emerging as part of Vision 2030. The Kingdom's drive for economic diversification is truly opening doors, as we've heard today. We hope today's session has provided valuable insights into how companies can effectively position themselves to capitalize on these opportunities. And a special thank you to our speakers, Asma and Paul, for sharing their expertise and shedding light on such a dynamic and fast evolving market. As we move forward, it's clear that understanding the nuances of this transformation will be crucial for businesses looking to thrive in Saudi Arabia's new era. We encourage you to stay connected with us and continue exploring how your organization can align with Vision 2030's goals. We'll be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the webinar recording, additional resources, and a feedback survey. Your input, as always, is invaluable and helps us enhance future webinars. So we'd greatly appreciate you taking the time to fill it out. Once again, thank you for attending. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Cheers all. See you in Saturday.
Yes, definitely.